Students, in the last video we have studied about the three types of variable scopes: local scope, global scope, and the non-local scope. Okay, we have seen different examples also in the previous videos, how to use these three types of variable scopes in our programs. What is the significance of these three types of scopes? Okay, now in this video, I'm going to discuss about the arguments and parameters in functions, which is your next topic. So we will study about different types of arguments which can be passed to any function or any user defined function. Okay, so first of all, let us understand what is actually the difference between arguments and parameters, because these two terms, arguments and parameters, are used interchangeably in place of each other, because see, they are so similar in meaning, in usage also, that sometimes we tend to forget that these are actually two different things. Okay, most of the time we would refer to them as the same thing. Okay, but there is a very little difference, very minute difference between the two. Okay, like what is a parameter? A parameter is the variable listed inside the parenthesis in the function definition. Okay, so you can see here, this is the function definition here. What is there? This greet is a function here, which I have encircled it also in with the red color. You can see in the this example here. What is this? This greet is a function. Okay, and what is there? Name and message are two variables which are listed inside the parenthesis in the function definition. This is a function definition from 1 to 4. These 4 lines are comprising the function definition, and name and message are the two variables which are listed inside the parenthesis. So by the definition of parameter, name and message are the parameters of this greet function, because they are listed inside the parenthesis when the function is being defined. Okay, so actually these parameters are holding the values which are being passed to the function. Okay, so whenever we want to use the passed values in the function, we will refer to the values in the function by these variable names only. Okay, like here what we have done in the fourth line, the print statement we have used in the function, what we have printed, we have just printed the values of these variables. Okay, and what values are these variables holding? These variables are holding the values which have been passed by the main function. You can see in the main function is having only one line here. Okay, the sixth line, you can see greet Monica comma good morning. Okay, so Monica and good morning are two strings. Okay, two messages which have been passed in this greet function, and then in the main program. Okay, the main program here is calling greet function, and it is passing Monica and good morning as the two strings here. So what is actually happening? Monica and good morning are the two strings which are being passed to this greet function, and where they will be assigned to? They will be assigned as per their fixed position. Fixed position means what? Like Monica will be assigned in name. Why? Because name is coming first and message is coming second, MSG is coming second. So Monica will be assigned in name, and good morning will be assigned to the variable message. Okay, this is an example of fixed arguments. Okay, arguments whose number and position is fixed. Okay, their position is also fixed and their number of arguments is also fixed. This is how we can define a function with fixed arguments. This is the meaning of fixed arguments. Fixed means what? Fixed means position as well as the number of arguments are fixed. So here what we are going, there are two parameters. Okay, and corresponding to these two parameters, we have two arguments also. So now coming on to arguments, what is actually an argument? An argument is the value that is sent to the function when it is called. Okay, so here what is there? What is the all of you can understand what are the arguments in this case? They are Monica and good morning. Monica and good morning are the arguments which are passed to the function when it is being called. Okay, the greet function. So Monica is being assigned to name and good morning has been assigned to MSG variable. Okay, and the same has been printed in the function definition also using the print statement. Okay, so this is example of fixed argument. Fixed argument means what? You can't change the position as well as the order of the arguments here. Okay, now on this in the coming examples we will see, in the coming slide we will see how we can define variables functions with variable arguments. Okay, variable arguments in your program. Okay, now here let us see what happens if we try to change the number of arguments in this program. Okay, without defining it properly. Then what will happen if we try to call the function with different number of arguments? Then what will happen? The interpreter will show an error. Okay, why? Because this type of function definition is an example of a function definition with fixed number of arguments. Okay, here we had having fixed arguments. So if you want to change, if you try to call the function with different number of arguments, if you like here there were 2 arguments, so what we can do, there are only 2 options possible. We can call it with either 1 argument or with no arguments. Okay, if you try to do that, then what will happen, the interpreter will show an error message. Okay, like for example in the first case, what we are going to do, if you try to pass only 1 argument to greet, like if you are passing only one string which is Monica, okay, then what will happen, this Monica will not be assigned to the first variable which was name here. Now what will happen, because we are now passing a different number of arguments, only we are passing only 1 argument which is less than the number of arguments required, then it will show an error message that missing 1 required positional argument. Okay, again if you try to call this function without passing any argument, again it will show an error that it is missing 2 required positional arguments, okay, which are name and message. Okay, name and msg. So positional arguments means what, which are having a specific position. Okay, so how we can solve this problem. Our problem was to define to call the function with different number of arguments. So this problem can be solved by defining a function which can take a variable number of arguments. Okay, so in the coming slides we'll see how we can do that. So actually what we can do, this variable function arguments could be defined in 3 ways. Okay, the first is the default argument, the second is the keyword arguments, okay, and the third is the arbitrary arguments. So default arguments, keyword arguments and arbitrary arguments are the three main types of variable, the 3 main ways of defining a function with variable function arguments. So variable function arguments can be defined basically with these 3 types. Okay, the first one is the default argument, second is your keyword arguments, and third is the arbitrary arguments. So here we will discuss these 3 types of arguments one by one. Okay, so first of all we will discuss about default arguments here. Okay, default arguments means what, here the function arguments can have default values in them. Okay, default values in them means what, that those values which we had defined when we were defining the function itself. Okay, those defined default values means what, we are not passing these values when we are calling the function. Okay, default values are not passed when we are calling the function. Default values have been defined at the time of definition of the function itself. Like if you see here, this example is example of default arguments. You can see the same example we are taking here. What we are doing, we are just modifying while we are creating this definition of the greet function. We are just modifying the second argument to become a default argument. How? By specifying a default value of good morning to the msg variable. Here we have written greet, then parenthesis name comma msg is equal to good morning. So msg is equal to good morning. Previously msg was a positional argument, it was not having any default value, but here what we have done, we have provided a default value to the argument, to the parameter. Okay, so here what will happen, now when you provide a default value to any parameter, then it means that it becomes a default argument. So default arguments are not compulsory to be passed to the function. Okay, we can ignore the default arguments while passing values to the while calling any function. While we are calling any function, only the positional arguments have to be passed. Okay, if you don't pass the default arguments, then what will happen, the default arguments will be the default arguments will be assigned with the default values. Okay, the default values will be passed in the case of will be passed in the place of default arguments. Okay, and the variable will be assigned with the default value. Okay, so here see, we can provide a default value to any argument by using the assignment operator. Okay, equal to, like we have done in the first line here. Okay, let us define variable number of arguments using default arguments in the greet function of previous example. So here we are defining variables. This is one way of defining variable number of arguments. Okay, why is it a way? See, because what happens, once we define a default argument here, then it is not necessary to pass all the values while calling any function. Then we have 2 choices, either we can pass both the values while calling the function, we can pass the positional argument as well as the default argument value, or what we can do, the second option is to pass only the positional value, and the second we can ignore. Okay, the second argument we can ignore. So once we define a default argument, so our number of arguments become variable. Okay, number of arguments become variable means what, we can use variable number of arguments while we can pass variable number of arguments while calling our function. Okay, this example is very simple. Okay, here we have defined a default value here for msg variable. Okay, and then when we call this function in the 15 and 16 lines, see the last two lines, line numbers 15 and 16 are the code of the main program. So here what we are doing, we are calling this greet function in two ways. Okay, now in the first way, what we are doing in the greet function, we are only passing the value of the first parameter, which is a positional parameter, which is a name parameter. Okay, in the name variable, we are passing only the Kate as the value here, as a string value. And the second one, what we are doing, we are passing both the values here. Okay, so this is example. So here what has happened, the same greet variable which we can call only by using two variables, two arguments in the previous example. In the previous example, what was there, we were able to call the greet function only by using at least two arguments, because both the arguments were fixed, both the arguments were positional in that case. Okay, but now what we have done, just by defining a default argument, what we have done, we have now created, we have now used we have now called this greet variable by using variable number of arguments. Okay, either by passing both the arguments or by ignoring the default argument. So now the number of arguments here have become variable here. Okay, the same greet function can be called with variable number of arguments, as it is seen in the two lines 15 and 16. First, we have called it only by passing only the name value, which is a positional argument, and the second case we have passed the default value also. So what happens actually in the first case is what happens in the first line, see the output here, hello Kate, good morning. So hello Kate, hello is the message here, and then in the print statement we have displayed the values of the variables name and message, or msg you can say. So in the name, Kate has been in the first line of output, what is there, we have passed only in the 15 line, we have passed only the first argument. So what happens, the second argument has been substituted, the message value has been substituted with the default value. What is the default value here? It is good morning. So we can say you can see the output here as hello Kate, good morning. Okay, and then in the second line is what, in the second line, second output is pertaining to the second call. Here what we are doing, we are again calling the function with the two values, which one is for the name, which is Bruce, and again in second one, what we have done, now we have passed a value with the default variable, default argument itself. So whenever we pass any value to the default argument, and what happens, that default value is substituted by the new value which we are passing. Okay, is it clear? So what was the default value in this case? It was good morning. So after we passed, now what we are doing, the second in the second call, we are passing this value. How do you do to the message string, which is a default variable, which is a default argument. So now what will happen, the default value, which is good morning of message, it will be replaced by how do you do. Okay, so now you can see the output is very clear. Now in the second call, what happens, the second time the print statement will execute in the second message call, and what will happen, this name has been name, the Bruce will come in the place of name here. Okay, hello Bruce we will get, and then in the place of message we will get how do you do, which is the new value to the default variable. Okay, is it clear to all of you? If you don't specify any value, if you don't pass any value to the default variable, default argument, then what will happen, its default value will be substituted in the program. If you use in the program, if you pass any value, then that default value will be substituted with the new value. Okay, now the same explanation is being given in the next slide, which you will see here. See, this is explanation of the previous example. Okay, I've noted it down for you also, so that we can make notes also. It is very important to make notes, because unless until you make notes of the videos, you will not be able to retain what you have learned or understood from the videos. Okay, that is just a simple explanation. In this function, the parameter name does not have a default value and is required during a call. Okay, on the other hand, the parameter message has a default value of good morning, so it is optional during a call. Okay, it was optional. If you can pass it, it will be a substitute. If you don't pass that, if you don't pass the value to the default argument, then the default value will be used in the program. If a value is provided, it will override the default value. Any number of arguments, see, these lines are very important. Any number of arguments in a function can have a default value. Okay, we can have any number of arguments in a function which are having default value, but what is the rule which has to be followed here? Once we have a default argument, all the arguments to its right must also have default values. Okay, it means that as soon as we have a default argument, then all the arguments which come after the default argument. Come after means what? Which are written to the right of the default argument. Those should also be having default values. Okay, in other words, once we have a default argument, then after that no non-default argument should come. Okay, once we have a default argument, then all the values, all the arguments which come after that, which come to the right of the default argument, should also have default values. Okay, this means to say non-default arguments cannot follow default arguments. Okay, for example, if we had defined the function header as, if we define the value as, so see what, message is equal to good morning, and then we write name. So now we have, what we have done in this example, we have changed the order of providing the two variables. Okay, previously what we had done, previously we had given provided name at the first. Okay, and at the right side of name we had given the message as good morning. We have provided the message variable. So now the message variable is a default variable. Okay, so we are, if and the name is a positional argument and MSG is default argument, so by rule what we will get, we will get an error. We will get the error as non-default argument follows default argument. Okay, why? Because in this case the default argument is message, which is being followed by a non-argument and non-default argument. Okay, so how we have to rectify this? We have to rectify this by following the previous order, that name should also always come before the name, which is a positional argument, should have been given before the MSG, which is the default argument in this case. So I think it is clear to all of you, this rule has to be followed everywhere. Okay, in this video we will stop here. In the next video we will start with your second type of variable function argument, which is the keyword arguments. Thank you.